No, I did. Go ahead and stare off. What's up? Good morning, my fellow people, human beings.
Sentience.
Yes.
That's a good one, sentient. Right on.
Yes.
Cool.
We have
Well,
we,
I'm very excited about this. I know Ryan and I and Dylan have been talking about this for a while. Ryan, why don't you go ahead and introduce today's show?
to the show. Well, you're doing the topic because this is Chris's topic, but I brought a friend, my friend Ayesha, who is a expert on the topic we're speaking of. So explain exactly what it is you have education in, because I will fuck it up. I promise.
Okay. Well, I don't know how comfortable I feel with the word expert, but I definitely know a lot. Yes, I'm currently getting a master's in the Gender and Race Studies department at the University of Alabama. My focus is primarily the gender studies part of that, but the degree requires certain components of race studies as well, and there's a lot of intersection there. My undergraduate degree is in human and environmental sciences with a focus in addiction studies and anthropology. And yeah, I do a lot of other random certifications, but I don't know how many of them apply to gender studies. But I am also a member of the queer community and have a lot of friends who kind of disrupt the ideas of gender. So I have lived experience as well.
That's amazing.
I was about to say, how many of us feel really stupid right now?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And whether or not it's, I think that's amazing in and of itself. And then with the current climate, I mean, we can talk about the current climate all you want, but I think with the current climate, I think that it makes it even more amazing to me. I mean, it just with the way that things have sort of fleshed out, however you want to say it, with the standing that there is today in that world, I'm impressed and interested more than anything. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to hang out with us, because that's amazing. And we all have questions, so whenever, Ryan, maybe you should start off and
yeah. Okay. So, I'm just gonna dive right into it. Like gender identity, right?
Mhm.
Like that's my main question. So people, keep in mind, all three of us are from the deep South, so like completely
Yeah,
ignorant in all of this. Like
we should probably preface the conversation with that. Is
the
that
amount of like
I'll,
ignorance.
I'll say this, and then we'll just let it go. There's nothing there's no rhetorical questions today. Like none of this stuff is obviously. If we ask you a question that seems odd, it's just based on our flat out ignorance,
Pure stupidity.
Yeah. So
well,
please.
I mean, I like this is good. I want to say this too. I am a firm believer that anyone who makes someone who's asking a question feel stupid is an asshole, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I'm an intelligent person, right? But if I'm unable to convey the meaning behind what I'm saying to someone who is ununderstanding or confused or unaware or ignorant, then I'm not as smart as I think I am. So I'm not gonna pretend that I know everything, and anyone who does is a liar. And I have so much respect for y'all for wanting to do this topic on your podcast. Like, I am genuinely excited to have this conversation, and I'm like super, like, I'm proud of you. I don't know you, but like, I'm proud that you guys are doing this.
Awesome. Well, then we're gonna get along just fine, because I have, I mean, like I said, I've just a general interest in a lot of this stuff. So anyway, we'll stop rambling. I just wanted to try and convey some level of just some level for you to realize that this is just comes from a good place, and you'll obviously realize that within a few minutes. And since if you know Ryan's talked to you, you know that this is not anything other than that. So anyway, Ryan.
Actually, it's a trick. We tricked you on it.
I've been trapped.
We're to ridicule you now.
But if that were how this turned out, I'd be fine. I have a thick skin and a smart ass mouth. Like,
unfortunately,
go.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you probably have to deal with that a lot more than we probably realize. So anyway, Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, you deal with my wife constantly, so
oh,
she can hold her own. Trust me. Okay, so yeah, my first question was going to be like with the gender identity, like, and then it's also into the sexuality of it.
Okay.
So
So yeah, I
like,
think that's a good starting spot, like the differentiations between the
yeah,
different
it's
things.
like if a man identifies as a woman, right, and then gets a sex change,
Hmm.
and then has sex with men, is that like, is he like, I don't understand what's the difference. Like, why would he not just come out and be gay? You know what I mean? Like,
Okay, okay. Yeah, no, I get it. So this is a question that gets asked a lot, and is a wonderful
damn it, I
series.
thought I was original.
No, and like, but like the
Tisk,
TikTok
tisk.
jokes around this are like, they amuse me to no end. But okay. So first, it's important to understand that we're talking about three different things in this scenario, right? So chromosomal sex, so the things you get from the sperm and the egg that your mom and dad gave you, right? X and Y chromosomes. Biological sex, which is based on secondary sex characteristics, which is things like, boobs or a penis, or where you have hair on your body, how tall you are.
Like what you're
And
attracted to?
no, like your physical appearance. That's
Oh,
going
you're
to
talking
be
about yourself, not like,
right. So your sex is your physical appearance, which is
okay,
different from your chromosomal sex.
that's what
Because
you're attracted to.
no, your chromosomal sex is the things that make you. So like the sperm and the
Oh,
egg
what you're actually
coming
like your
together.
biological makeup of.
Yes.
Okay,
Well, so chromosomal sex, biological sex is what you look like,
hmm,
right? So when you're born and the doctor looks and he's like, there's a penis, it's a boy, there's a vagina, it's a girl. That's going to be biological sex.
okay,
Gender is how you express yourself.
Hmm.
Okay. So there are these three things. And the reason that it's important to differentiate the three things, well, there's a bunch of reasons, but one reason is there are people who have, like we all make jokes about micro penises, right? But like there are, yeah, I know Ryan's guilty of it. And I'm just gonna assume that Chris and Dylan are too.
No, hold on. We can put, no. Jesus God. If there's anything we walk away from, no, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
but like seriously, so like we know that there's like a vast difference in like the way that things can express themselves in our nether regions, and there are people who are born, we used to use the word hermaphrodite, so there are people who are born where you can't really tell when you look at them when they're born if they're a boy or a girl, and that is the result of intersex or something chromosomally being different. So that's why it's important to differentiate between chromosomal sex and biological sex.
I think not, and not to interrupt or to piggyback off anything, but I think that what you just, the explanation that you just gave, I think at its purest form is sort of the no one understands that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because when I hear this conversation with so many people, and I'll just use the word conservatives, maybe that's wrong. When I talk to so many conservative people who sort of start to want to take issue with it, that's their first thing, is they try to tell you, or they try to explain to you as if they're in your position or something, that there's only male and female, and if you're born a male, you feel like a male. So the idea that there's more than one, that the gender and sex are not the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a general misunderstanding of that, which leads to more ignorance on the situation. So I think that if people could understand, or even just hear it said, I think that, unfortunately, I just don't think it's we live in a 15-second news cycle system, to where what you just said takes 45 seconds, so we're all screwed, kind of thing. So I think that being able to understand it, I think, is a good first step.
Yeah, no, and I always, this is where I like to start these conversations, because the go-to retort to gender expression issues is, but there's only men and women.
Right.
But the intersex scenario that I just explained happens in 8% of the population, and that's the
really?
same. That's the same percentage as natural redheads, right? So this is happening a
Oh,
lot.
fucking redheads! God
I know.
damn
Listen,
it!
we
Like,
talked about micropenises. Now we're talking about redheads.
genders? We're talking about genders?
You're hitting all the bases.
Yeah.
Fuck.
But yeah, so like a lot of intersex people don't even know that they're intersex. They might just think that they have weird body hair issues, or that they have a small penis or a large clit, or like a lot of people who fall into that 8% don't know that they are in that 8%. And that's a whole other issue. But so we've determined the difference between chromosomal sex and biological sex. And then gender is something entirely different. I like to say hearts, not parts. How you feel in your heart that you want to express to yourself, to the world, that's your gender, right? So like,
wow, okay.
And so many things go into gender expression. It's not just how you dress or what pronouns you use, right?
Sure,
I am a woman, but I've always been, a tomboy, right? So like that's a masculine presentation, but I still fall into the category of woman. I'm not saying that I don't, but it's those socialized activities are just as much about gender as what we wear. But we as a society allow people to play with that a little bit, right? Like it's okay for girls to be tomboys. That is allowed in the 21st century. But if a boy who identifies as straight wants to wear nail polish, that's going to be a little bit of a problem, here in the deep South, right? But like that's becoming more normalized in Gen Z, which is one of my favorite things about them, like straight boys wearing nail polish. Primo, love that shit. But
I'll put on a dress, man, but the nail polish, that's pushing it for me.
I think for me, like when I at least when I hear you talk about it, thinking about a guy wearing nail polish to me is, I think that it could speak to something a lot more than him just wanting to put on nail polish, right? Like that sort of like being able to look, it's almost like a test, right? Like, are you going to look at me and judge me and judge me and initially off the rip because I'm wearing nail polish? If I can see that, I already know I can just keep walking. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if if it's just a subconscious thing or if people just actively do that. I don't know, but that's the way that I kind of hear it when I hear you talk about it.
Yeah, no, and that's like a lot of people will wear nail polish, or a lot of male presenting people will wear nail polish to do just that, to be subversive, right? So it's not that they're enacting a feminine gender identity, but they just want to be subversive, and that is very much the case too, right? It's not just about gender.
And I think that's so important. I think that's cool as shit, and I think it's very important.
But when you say like, okay, so when you say gender, like, once again, I'm super confused. So I've got so many questions. Like, I'm still hung up on the chromosomal, what was it? Biological part of it. Like, don't your chromosomes like make up your biological part? And I get the identity because like, I mean, like mentally, God only knows what people have going on upstairs. Like, I get that like completely. But like, as far as like having, so you would have like both, like you said, hermaphrodites, like both male and female parts, or?
So, and the word hermaphrodite is now like that's an old word. So now we would just say intersex. But yeah, so there are people, so we get an X chromosome from our mom's eggs, right? And then I'm a woman, so I got an X chromosome from my dad's sperm, but y'all presumably got a Y chromosome from your dad's sperm, right? So I'm XX, y'all three are XY, right?
Okay.
This is what we learn in biology class. What we don't learn is that some people can be XXY or XYY.
Oh.
So, and then when you get more complicated in the genetic material like that, your body's kind of like, well, what do I grow? And that's where it gets complicated.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
That makes, I didn't know, like I said, once again, didn't even know that existed, so.
Well, unfortunately, I think that how many times does that's kind of speaks to a bigger problem, right? Like, just sort of maliciously teaching someone something a certain way in order to produce a certain result, I think is public school systems are kind of known for that sort of thing. So I think that just having knowledge on the topic is obviously paramount. Can I ask you, what was there something besides your own sexuality? Maybe it was your own sexuality. Was your own sexuality what made you want to sort of explore this and turn this into your life's work?
That's a very good question.
Very
So
thoughtful
that's
question,
a very
Chris.
good question. I've been a feminist since the first grade. My dad raised us, my sisters and I, to be feminists. Not my mom, which always surprises people. But my dad's an immigrant. He moved to this country in the 80s to flee the civil war in Lebanon. And he, had American children, and we were raised with this idea that, we are Americans, and for that reason, we have rights. And then in Arab culture, women don't change their name when they get married. And my dad was like, I want you guys to have the best of both worlds. I want you to have your solidified identity as women, separate from men. And I want you to know that you're growing up in a country where you can do anything. Right.
Wow.
So
That's fucking amazing.
I want your dad.
and my dad would have all of you. He loves adopting friends. He's just like,
awesome.
more the merrier.
Awesome.
He's genuinely a gem of a person. But in the first grade, when it was career day at school, I had like a little jacket and I was like, I'm Hillary Rodham Clinton, and everyone, and like,
oh, wow.
And this was in Mobile, Alabama. Like,
holy shit.
Yeah, I was not popular. I did not have very many friends.
Can I ask one more thing before we move on? Just tell me what year would you have graduated high school?
I graduated high school in 2009. I'm 31 years old.
Okay, all right, perfect.
Yeah.
I just wanted a little bit of context.
Yeah, context. Okay. Yeah, so like this was like height Hillary and Bill.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think Bill Clinton might have been my first crush, which looking back on it now makes a lot of sense.
That's great. That's awesome.
But yeah, so like I've been interested in feminism since a very young age. I did not realize my sexuality until a few years ago. I'm sober. I'm in long-term recovery, and in the process of getting sober and learning who I was as a person, I figured this out about myself. So I'm like a late bloomer in the queer community, but no one was surprised when I told them that I was like, y'all, I think I might not be straight. And all of my queer friends were like, we know. Like, we were waiting for you to figure it out, Right. But yeah, so my academic interests prior to graduate school were motivated based just in feminism and in a desire to like make the world a better place through like public health and cultural understanding. And the reason I chose to do this master's degree was in part because I couldn't decide which PhD track I wanted to go down. Did I want to do anthropology or did I want to do public health? And so doing a gender studies degree, I really wanted to get like a foundation of like all of the different theoretical stuff so that I can pick which PhD route I wanted to go. It hasn't been helpful. I still don't know what I want to do for my PhD.
It didn't work.
No, I have like academic ADHD. I'm like, oh, well, now I want to go, become a midwife. I should go to nursing school. Like, right. It's not helping, but I am enjoying it.
Yeah, college is designed to do that. It just fucks with you even more.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I want to do this.
I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I really should probably know that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's funny because I think as a society, I think that there's a movement or a majority of people now probably they're sort of starting to shy away from that kind of 4-year experience. And while I understand that and I support that, I think that's great. That I also wonder what that is the social implications of that, right? Of having a massive group of people that didn't go through that sort of that social, it's almost kind of a social experiment to send someone to a facility who has never done anything in their entire lives to go live with a bunch of other people who are starting anyway. So I just wonder what it's going to do to, I mean, getting there and learning that you have more interests. I mean, that's huge. And I think that that's unfortunate that a lot of people won't be able to experience that. But
yeah,
going to a 4-year university is much, I think it's just a different time. So,
Yeah, for sure. The academy, as
Yes.
Right.
hoity-toity academics like to call it, the academy is very exclusive, and
My
that is,
yacht club wasn't open this week.
Yeah.
Or when they just call it, or my favorite is when they just refer to it generally as university. I think that might be more of
oh yeah.
a UK thing, but it still brings about that sort of those implications.
But I will say, like, that's one of the things I like about feminism. A lot of like the feminist, like the foundational feminist writers and thinkers were not women who went to college, right?
Sure.
And they wrote what they wrote and, you know, gave the speeches they did and did the work they did without having gone to college. You know, some of them did, right? But like a lot of like those big deal people in my field, their work is accessible, right? Like it's easy to
Sure.
understand, it's easy to read, it's easy to purchase. It's not like a textbook, you know?
Right.
And so like, I do feel like there's a lot of potential to include people who are not like in the class of academic, quote unquote.
Right.
And I enjoy that.
Nice.
Dylan, do you have a question? Because I have so many. I'm just going to start running with them, and I want to give you an opportunity.
We'll just go in a
No,
circle.
go ahead.
Ryan, me, and Dylan. All right.
All right. Well, hold on. So wait. Okay. When you said the part the gay and queer community, right?
Mhm.
So this is one thing that like, and it's not gender at all, but like, so with like gay and queer people, like I feel like I'm going to offend somebody that is like just because of like I'm just very unfiltered, you know. And
Mhm.
I like the and like you and me, we get along and stuff, but like I feel like when I'm talking to like it's hard for me to like befriend those type of people because I feel like I'm like, okay, censor myself, like I can't say these certain words or whatever, you know what I mean? So like, and it's the same thing with like race and stuff. Like I'm not racist at all, but like with the community and the way like the world is now, I'm like, I'm gonna say something. This person's gonna, because I'm white. This person's gonna hate me or I'm a male. You know what I mean? So like, how would you like as in that community? Like, how do you people like receive? Like, I don't know. Am I going to offend someone like by trying to like just be myself around them? Because
Mhm.
I feel like
Yes.
there's a certain like
You are.
I mean I know I'm probably offending someone right now, but I'm just like I really like I don't like have any like misconceptions, but like I feel like I have to like censor myself or I'm gonna like offend somebody nowadays. Is there a way around that, or should I just like go off the just don't even worry about it? And be like, it'll be fine. He'll be fine.
I mean, it's like a little bit of everything, Ryan, right? So like, I think the way that you're thinking about being offensive, can be challenged, right? So like, I think as people in a position of privilege, right, which as white men y'all are,
Oh
you
yeah.
right? So like when you're in a position of privilege, no matter how hard you try, you're going to cause a harm, be that
Oh.
offense given, or like, you know, you could consider something like getting pulled over and excused from a speeding ticket, whereas someone else not having that same experience like that, you know, like you can't help it, right? Is what I'm saying. And when I took a step back and said, you know what, like I'm probably as a white presenting person going to offend someone in this community. It's how you respond afterward that's important. That's when things really changed for me, right? So like if I do say something that hurts someone's feelings or offends them, or, you know, they just like don't like it, the next step for me would be to say, you know, I feel like I made you uncomfortable or offended you. You know, I apologize. That wasn't my intention. Would you mind taking a moment to explain to me what it was that offended you so that I can work on it? Right. And like that conversation isn't always going to happen, right? Like if I'm at the drag show, no one's going to take the time to be like, yeah, let's step outside and smoke a cigarette and I can explain to you systemic racism. Like no one's going to do that. So sometimes I just have to chalk it up to, okay, that person isn't probably going to like me now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Right.
Well, like this happened to me the other day. Like I was around a transgender person, and like my wife is like, "Look, these are their pronouns. Please try to like." And I was like, in my head, I was like, I'm gonna do this right. I'm gonna." And first, I was like, "What's up, man?" And I was like, "Wait, damn it, fuck!" And like fucked it up, like right off the rip. I was like, "Now this person thinks I'm a fucking." And I was super weird the rest of the time. I was like, "Hello, person." Like, yeah. Fucked
Yeah,
me
well,
up.
you know, like I fuck that up too. One of my best friends in the entire world has started to use they them pronouns, and I still accidentally refer to them as him sometimes, right? Or, I, having grown up in the North for a period of my life, dude and man was like very like,
Yeah.
hey man, hey dudes, what's up, little dudes, and those are gendered terms that people sometimes are not comfortable being referred to as. And so I love the South because of y'all, right? So I've tried to transition to saying y'all instead, but like even I mess this up sometimes. And it's all about your intention and your response afterwards. Like, oh shit, I'm sorry, right? Or just if they don't make it a big deal out of it, right? If they're not like, why the fuck do you call me man? Like sometimes it's worth just like brushing over and doing better later in the conversation.
Yeah, that's probably the hard part for me. It's like going up to them like, I made a mistake. Let me like, the amends part of a program. You're like,
Yeah.
fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then
Well,
I'm like,
I
I'd
think,
rather just live in discomfort and not fucking acknowledge that anything happened.
but I also think that, as sort of like, if to be as hoity-toity or kumbaya as you want to be, I think that a big part of what's missing from today is just general empathy for the person that you're talking to, the person you're having a conversation with. Because if if I'm having this kind of conversation with the transgender person or a queer person, they're gonna know, they're gonna hopefully, I mean, get the idea of like you said, my intention, right? Like, and for them to sort of just be able to, okay, well, this person is learning something new, and I think that if it's handled correctly, I think that it's pretty simple. Now, again, a drag show, any other kind of societal interaction, you might not have the time or the resources or whatever to say, hey, I'm a little bit ignorant on this, excuse me if I come across a certain way. Like that, unfortunately, that just doesn't tend to happen. But I like I said, I just think that being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes for a moment is big for that. But
Yeah, for sure.
I
And then
would,
also, like Google is free, right? Like that's a joke that gets told a lot. And some people don't have the emotional capacity to be able to have conversations like this. And that's part of why I love having them, because I do have the emotional capacity, right? So this is like a service I can do for my community. But some people, for example, my friend who I mentioned earlier was ruthlessly bullied for almost their entire life for just being really weird for a boy. And now that they're kind of like discovering themselves a bit more and starting this gender journey, they genuinely, having these conversations sometimes puts them into like a very dark emotional place, because it reminds them of the before times, right? Before they were surrounded by a loving, supportive community. And so like, even if you were in a space and time where you could have that conversation, where you say, hey, I'm ignorant, I'm trying not to be, can you help me? It might not be something that they can do.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's, yeah, I see. And I wouldn't have even, I would have never really, I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but that's odd. But I mean, taking 2 seconds to think about that, it's obvious that that could be a traumatic situation.
Yeah.
I guess my next thing, and I hear a lot of these questions that I'm asking or thinking of are some of them are questions that I've heard. Unfortunately, sometimes that you hear a question in society, and whether you get a real answer, whatever.
He's turning into the T-1000, dude. Terminator.
That's it.
Yeah, like they get.
We lost you there for a second, Chris.
Okay. What I was interested in is you hear a lot of people ask or talk about how this has become like a new thing, right? Like you hear people say that, oh, for some reason society hasn't always been this way, and while I to me there's obvious reasons about why this is, the way that we share information, and people are now starting to have the courage to come out, and although we've got a long way to go, I think that people are starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. So I hear people ask all the time, like, if this is a new thing, or what, what's the understanding there? Is it, is it a new thing, or is it just becoming easier to talk about?
So it's not a new thing.
Right.
Prior to global colonization by white European powers, there were a multitude of cultures that had more than one gender expression, right? here on, in America, Turtle Island, as the indigenous folks refer to it, there were two-spirited and third, like that's their third gender classification. Two-spirited individuals were in the structure of their communities and were respected and revered and had special jobs. And like another example would be, in India, there's a third gender. They're called hijras, Hidjra. And while they are kind of like shunned from community and like they like live in their own special like little sector, they still have a role in the community. And then we see all sorts of like Arab and Islamic figures that were transgender or gender nonconforming, right? And like in European history, prior to the expansion of like the Christian kingdom from Western Europe over, there were definitely there's historical evidence of queer relationships, and in Africa as well. And gender roles were not the same as they are in the Western world today, right? Like there were matriarchal systems instead of patriarchal systems, right? Where women owned everything and family lineage was passed down through women, because you know which vagina the baby came out of, but you don't know which sperm made the baby, right? So like,
Yeah, see, that makes so much sense. That like I hear people challenge that idea of the matriarchal versus the patri, but to me, it seems to make more sense. I don't know. Like I guess they both have their whatever, but anyway.
I mean, yeah, merits on either side, I suppose. But as a woman, I'm like, matriarchy sounds pretty chill. I love being in charge. Everything's mine. But yeah, so that's like this, so it's not a new idea. I do think we're seeing like a resurgence of these things. People are finally like, I'm gonna demand my spot in society and I'm gonna speak out about it. And the powers that be aren't used to that, right? So it's disruptive and that makes us uncomfortable. And so it's like, if it's uncomfortable, it must be new. And and also if we think it's new, that makes it seem easier to stamp out, right? Like instead of this being something that's like 1,000-year-old institution that's trying to reestablish itself, if it's just something that's new, then we can blame it on something. Like we can blame it on music videos, right? And then we can censor music videos and solve the problem. Or we can blame it. I saw a thing on the news this morning, a very popular book series, a YA book series, A Court of Thorn and Roses, A Court of Mist and Fury. It's like a sexy young adult fantasy book series. Virginia is trying to ban the book series, right?
Ooh, a good old-fashioned book burning.
Yeah, and it's
Yes.
wild. It's wild to me. I was like, how is this book being banned? Well, it's very like provocative and queer, right? And so they're concerned about the children, and we don't want these kids to grow up confused, and so we should ban this book. And that goes to the idea of, this is a new thing that's happening in society, and we have a responsibility to make sure it doesn't continue, so we must ban this book. But it's not a new thing that's happening in society. And it's just mind-blowing to me that we're talking
Well,
about
like that's great, because like the confusion part of it is like, oh, people don't want to be like, people are already fucking confused. Like if we just stop, like don't talk about it, because I'm fucking confused. I'm like, I don't know how to interact with anybody at this point, you know what I mean? So it's like, let's just stop talking about it. It's like, that'll make it better.
Yeah, well, I think that's that right. Like that's it right there. Like you're either gonna like be open-minded and be able to think about the idea. Look, what blows my mind is that there you look back in history not that long ago, where things were introduced that everybody thought was crazy and insane, that are now commonplace and that are now part of our, like, and I'll be kind of hyperbolic here, but like at one time people thought that Black people using the same water fountains as white people was this outrageous, crazy idea, and people were lining up in the street saying that this is the demoralization of society. I mean, it went these crazy ideas. I mean, just integration itself, in as far as race goes, at one time was this crazy, outrageous thing, that this theory that people, and obviously it's kind of come around a little bit, but so that's just kind of how I think about it, is that like just because it's foreign to me, and because it's a new idea, people so many times with so many things, people hear that and they immediately clam up and shut up and turn around and walk away. And I just that's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate.
Dylan is like in deep thought over there. He's like, do I have a penis? I've never seen my penis.
A micro penis counts.
I think he's taking
It
notes.
does. It does. It can validate that for you.
Great. That's great.
So okay, I got my next question is and excuse me if I get the terminology wrong on this, gender reassignment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they do, okay, so like if you don't have the chromosome thing, but you're just genderly relate to being male or female, but you have the different biological makeup of it, you can get the surgery done, which will just give you the parts of whatever you identify with. Is that, I'm not explaining that right at all, but I think I'm in the ballpark,
Yeah,
right?
no, you're definitely in the ballpark. So gender reassignment surgery, as it has been termed for a long time. Now there's a push to call it gender affirmation surgery, right? So we're not reassigning ourselves, we're becoming who we have always felt we are on the inside. We're affirming our identity. Okay. So the idea behind these surgeries is, like, for some people, that's what they need to feel like they're expressing their gender appropriately. Some people don't feel the need to have surgery, and that's okay, right? Like it's a super invasive surgery. A lot of
Wait, you say invasive, what does that mean?
So the process to make a penis out of a vagina.
Yeah, explain that to me, because I'm like,
do
they cut off like another dick, like off a dead body, and like put it on?
They literally reach inside of you and pull things out of the vaginal canal to create. Yeah.
Sorry, that just sounds really.
It's intense.
Invasive.
It's intense.
Holy fuck.
To make a vagina out of a penis, right?
That seems easier. You could just chop that thing off, right? Like,
but then
split it like a hot dog.
Yeah. Well, they cut it off, and then they make, because there's still like a urethra opening where you pee out of, right? And then like below that, they make a vaginal canal. And while you're healing, you basically have a thing that's like a medical grade butt plug that you keep in there, so that it doesn't heal shut. Like it's an intense.
Well, what about the clit? Like, how do they have an orgasm though? Like at that point?
So the tip of your penis has the nerve endings that would be the equivalent of a clit, and so they just cluster those up from your penis head into the spot above the urethra. So a lot goes into this, right? A lot goes into this, and so not everyone wants to do that. Or there are people who want to do that but can't afford to do that, or can't afford to take the time off of work to heal and recuperate. So a lot of these, I think that there's this idea in the world at large that these surgeries are required to be transgender. They're not required, and they're not something that everyone wants. I will say there are other kinds of gender affirming care that I think a lot more people would like to be involved in, which is, like hormone replacement therapy, or puberty blockers for young folks, or top surgery, right? If having your breasts removed is not as invasive, that kind of thing, or like having your beard lasered off, like having laser hair removal, just to make your day-to-day life and expressing your gender a little easier without going through all of those surgical procedures.
When you say, okay, that's great. Sorry, I'm gonna jump back in.
Okay.
Great transition to my next question. When you say young people, like, so there's all this debate about like 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds being like, well, I feel like this. Like, personally, like when I was a kid, I was like, I'm a witch and I do witchcraft, and like, I was doing stuff with like human blood, like crazy stupid shit, right? And then like,
of course you were. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, like like stupid stuff, right? And then obviously, well, actually, I was gonna say 18, but once I got sober, I kind of like grasped the reality of like, okay, that's not.
I am a witch.
Yeah, I realized I'm
a witch too. There's nothing wrong with being a witch.
Yeah, exactly. But like I'm saying, like when I was younger, I didn't have the mental capacity to really understand like that. So like, in your opinion, do you think there should be like an age that people are allowed to receive these drugs, or I'm assuming they're drugs that what did you call it, hormone
Hormones
therapy?
and
Yeah,
puberty blockers.
yeah,
So I will preface this by saying I am not a parent, right?
yeah.
So I can have all of these ideas about how I think children should be raised and what they should be allowed to do, but like I'm not a parent. So I can only imagine, right, what it feels like to have your kid come to you and say that this is something they want to do. That being said, I have friends with queer children, and people, and I've worked in adolescent and early childhood childcare before. I was a nanny. I worked at a children's museum, prolific babysitter, and there are young people who, in my experience, at the age of 7, they know, you know and so I think that we kind of have to trust kids. And also, what people don't seem to understand about puberty blockers, right, is that you can come off of them and then go through puberty. I wouldn't want to be 25 and go through puberty. That sounds horrible, but it is something that can happen. But also, like, transgender children, for the most part, a transition for them is a haircut and a different wardrobe and a name change.
Hmm.
These kinds of chemical and medical treatments are not necessary for everybody, and especially not when they're like 7. But imagine turning well, actually, I don't know that I know what age you are when your balls drop. But imagine you're that age, right?
When you're
And
someone like me,
It's ongoing.
it's ongoing.
out of the womb, those things just hit the floor.
No. But like, yeah, you don't feel comfortable in your body, and you hate that part of yourself because it doesn't align with, like, your heart. Like you said in the beginning, hearts, not parts. And then you become really depressed. And we see a lot of self-harm, high risk behavior, and suicidality in these trans teens who haven't been given the opportunity to do what they want to do with their gender. And so, like, as a human being who hates to see people die, especially by suicide, I just, anything that can prevent a suicide for me feels important.
Yeah,
Um,
that would be absolutely, like, to deal with like just the regular, like, going through puberty and that whole fucking social bullshit, like, at that age, and then to combat fucking like your identity, like, because obviously I didn't have that problem, but that just sounds like the worst fucking situation ever, especially like if that was to happen like in the high school I grew up in.
mhm.
Like, it was fucking, it would have just been brutal. But yeah, my heart goes out to that shit would fucking
Well,
suck.
I mean, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong. I think another misconception is that a big portion of these medications that are available, because I think that obviously in some states now it's differently. Now they're criminalizing parents who are trying to help their children realize their gender, their identity. A lot of those medications are very easily reversible, correct? Like, I mean, again, I don't know, I'm sure, but from what I've understood, there's a big misconception of people thinking that these drugs are not sort of easily reversible by just not taking them anymore and putting time in between.
Mhm.
So I think that's important for people, for something. I mean, that was important for me when I was sort of looking into this and realized that I was kind of
Yeah. So, like, because there's the argument, right, that kids don't know who they are. Um,
Well, that's
and
that's what I mean. It's not my argument, but that's what I'm saying. Like, for example, like if my son came up to me at 8 and was like, "I am a woman," I'd be like, "You can be a woman all you want, but until you're 18, and like you can like do like I can't like condone, because like I said, like I know for me personally, mentally, I was not like I didn't know what was going on up there until way later in life. You know what I'm saying? So we're not going to do anything that's going to be irreversible until later on. But I support you. I'll love your boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever you bring home. Like, I don't care, because it really affects my life. Not not at all, you know. But at the same time, I'm not going to be like, here, because you're 8 years old and you think this, and you like. I'm afraid that like it's because I'm afraid like people will jump on a certain social bandwagon.
Mhm.
You know, be like, oh, my friends are like this, so I want to be like this, and it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I get that. I really do. I really do. But also like I I know how much you love your son, and
Yeah,
I'm but
totally.
so like I can imagine that if he did, like, just from what I know of y'all, right? Like if he were to come to you and say like, I want to use they them pronouns now and I think I want to paint my nails, how would you feel about that?
I would need him to explain to me what pronouns were first.
But you know
So
what's wild? He might be able to.
he probably could, way
He
better than
might
I
be able
could.
to.
I'm still confused about that, but I'm like, what? Aren't we all just people? No, but
But even the fact that you would be willing to like
oh,
have
absolutely. I'd be like,
conversation, like that's huge.
yeah, yeah. We'd be like, okay,
Well,
I don't care. Like, I do care as long as he's happy.
Mhm.
Well, I just want him to be happy, but at the same time, at that young age, I'm like, dude, like seriously, I don't know, how old am I? 37, and I still am like, yeah, every now and then I'll throw on a dress and get all fucking crazied up, but like it's not like, I don't think like I could until he's old enough to like do that for himself. Like I would
Mhm.
not be like, here, let's
oh,
go
I,
get you, let's go get your this surgery done. Like for the
I
people
also,
that have
Right.
money
Well,
to
but
support that,
also like they won't do the surgery on a child. To have the
right.
surgery, you have to be an adult. You have to have been in therapy for a certain amount of time and you have to have all this paperwork signed. And it's not something that you can just go into all willy-nilly. And it's definitely not something that young people can do.
Oh yeah,
Um,
you can't
the
even
option,
the medications and stuff. You have to be either under your parents' consent or over the age of 18 too. I
right.
would think.
Yeah. Yeah, and the puberty blockers, like the medication that's available for trans teens, like that type of thing is, I mean, it's the same as like, like I went on birth control when I was 13 because I had really, really, really bad periods and it was getting in the way of being a varsity soccer star. So my parents were like, well, let's just get you on birth
A
control.
varsity soccer star.
Yeah, I was really good at soccer. But but like but my parents had this dilemma of like, well, what does it mean to put our daughter on birth control at 13, right? And it wasn't even that they were afraid that I was going to be some promiscuous slut, right? It was really the social implications of it for them. Like, will people know our daughter's on birth control and then think she's a slut and then think she's bad parents and then we'll be shamed, but going on birth control was important for me to be happy in doing the things I wanted to do. So my parents were willing to take me to do that. Right. And so in my mind, puberty blockers for a teenager, it's equivocal, right? Like this is a medication you need to take so that your hormones don't get in the way of you being happy. And then you can go off of it, right? Like I haven't been on birth control in quite some time now because I don't need it. And puberty blockers can be stopped in the same way that my birth control was stopped.
Hmm. See, once again, was it the book? What the more you know, the more you know.
Yeah, well, that's
The
such
more you know.
like if I feel like that's such it's so typical of us as a society to react this way. But the other thing that I was interested in is you had said that you knew very early on that you were a feminist, and so I'm curious, like what that word gets thrown around so much. What does it mean to be a feminist? Like if someone said, "What is feminism?" What would be your response?
So feminism is the liberatory practice and worldview of basically like opposing the patriarchy. That's what it means to me, right? Like you can toss around any definition of feminism you want, and
Right.
the people are going to be very like steadfast in what they think feminism is, right? There are people that think that feminism is the hatred of men, right? And like for me, that's not true, but I can't
Right.
speak for all feminists,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
But like my understanding of feminism is, and like we use the word feminism and not humanism or peopleism because for so long the women were the downtrodden, and so it is subversive to put that at the forefront and to be feminist, right? But then, there are, there's been different, we call them waves of feminism. So the first wave of feminism would have been the suffragettes, women fighting for the right to vote. And those women were super racist, right? Like they thought white women could vote, but not black women. So like, that's not good. We don't want to associate
Wow.
ourselves with that.
Wow.
So
That's
then we had the second wave of feminism, which was like the bra burning feminist that I think is
Those are
kind
my
of,
favorite. Those
Yeah,
were my
those-
favorite feminists right
but
here.
those feminists weren't inclusive of the queer community,
Damn it.
right? So now there's like the third wave feminism, which is inclusive of the queer community, but kind of shames sex workers, and we don't like that. So then there's fourth wave sex positive feminism, but like none of these feminisms really include non-white people. So then you have Black feminism, and feminism itself is so many things. And so for each person that says they're a feminist, they might mean something different. But for me, when I say I'm a feminist, what I mean is I am a person who believes at the fundamental core of all people, we should all be treated fairly. And in the system that we live in, that is a patriarchal, sexist, misogynistic, racist structure, feminism should challenge all of those things. And I know that that's a lot. It sometimes does feel overwhelming, but in my day-to-day life,
What?
yeah, I mean, okay, like in a society where rich white men are the best, anything I can do to make not rich white men have a better footing in their lives, then that's a feminist action for me.
That's great. I like that a lot. And you're absolutely right. I certainly recognize that the idea of what feminism means is it's not going to be the same from a woman who grew up in the 1950s or 60s and then a woman that is growing up now. So that's interesting.
And all that rich white person talk, all that rich white people talk. So at the end of our show, we'll vote who said the most white privilege thing you heard on the show today, and that's how we come up with our topics. Like
Okay.
that person who has voted, it will be the person
Well,
that chooses the
if I can
topic.
chime in, I haven't got to pick the topic yet, right? Like this is something we've talked about doing for a while. So I think that my pick of the topic next week still stands. I guess we can talk about that when we get there because I got something I want to talk about. But,
Yeah, Chris was voted last week for taking his kids to Disney World. He did the
Yeah.
most white privilege thing. So
That tracks.
yeah, definitely white privilege. So we are all very aware of. I always say it wrong. The patriarchy.
Yeah, patriarchy, yeah.
Fucking nailed it. Look at me speaking with words. But yeah, like we're all very aware that that's a real thing. So we try to make fun of it, and like I noticed a lot of like what you're saying. It's like language based, like how you speak to something or how like because it seems like everything that someone says like they're trying to make it with less negative connotation around it and all that. Like, so I think, and with this show, like really we just are three people that are like quote unquote trying to better ourselves, but like really just like having a good time with it, you know? Like, so I think that understanding like how that kind of communication will set a tone in the future. And this is me being political. Look at me talking in words that are make people feel good about them.
I think, you can call it being. I think it's so silly and odd that we've taken just basic kindness and basic human interaction and called it like PC or politically correct. Like I don't think that there's.
Yeah.
I think that it's crazy that we've made human kindness like a partisan thing or something. It's just odd. So what you're saying, Ryan, you can form it into it being political, but I think what you're saying is that it's just like, hey, if you want me to refer to you in a certain way, albeit like why,
Well, no, I'll say this, like if you want me to refer to you in a certain way, I will attempt to do that, but you also have to give me some fucking understanding that like for 37 years of my life, you know what I mean? Like I see someone with a mustache, and I'm like, hey, man, hey, guy, and like, but if you want me to call you woman, it's going to take me a little time to nail that down. You know what I mean? Like, there has to be that understanding of like, I have no problem. I welcome, like, the misfits are my people. Like, I love fucking the undercast, the addicts. Like, that's my fucking group of people. So I will try like my hardest to do that. But at the same time, like I said, I always feel like I'm offending someone, even if I fuck it up, and that's probably a lot to do with my personal like psyche.
I'll say this, and this is not the idea that you can have an interaction with someone and not risk offending them is silly. Like if you and I are having a conversation, Ryan, I've known you for however long, 30 years, just about, if you and I are having a conversation about something, we both have to realize that one of us could offend the other person. And just because you offend another person, it doesn't mean that you're doing it maliciously, or it doesn't mean that
Oh, I
you're
purposely try to
attempting.
offend you, Chris. Like every
Well,
time we talk.
I'm being serious in a conversation. It's like you have to realize that having dialogue with someone, there is the risk of one of the other person getting offended. That's just
Right.
But where I think like what you said is that, and what matters is how your response to that, or your reaction
Yeah.
to that. If I tell you that I want you to call me a certain pronoun and you tell me to fuck off, that it's my right to not whatever, like that's pretty indicative of the kind of kind of person, or the kind of relationship that's going to entail. So I just,
Yeah.
it's I think it's kind of odd the way that works.
You're odd the way you work.
And my last question, I think we're running up against the clock. What is your sort of like, say, end goal? Like, is this just kind of a continuing thing for you, or is there a specific field that would utilize this education that you're
Free
looking at?
everybody.
I mean, none of us are free until we're all free, right?
Good.
But yeah, so the practical end goal is, like I worked in addiction treatment for a little while, and I was really disheartened to see so many people not complete treatment, right? Or complete treatment and then return to use as soon as they left. And when I started investigating for myself what the patterns there were, just at the one treatment center where I worked, it was the people of color who got kicked out all the time because of, I'm not saying that anyone that worked at my facility was outright racist, but we have all of these ingrained, internalized, discriminatory ideas, right?
Absolutely.
To where the Black folks were being immediately, instead of saying, this person is upset, let me ask them what is wrong. It was, they're angry and violent. We have to get rid of them for the safety of others, right? So like that, but then also I was surprised at how many women were leaving treatment because their kids, because of their kids. And we don't have treatment centers that understand the importance of family, right?
Oh, fuck yeah. Yeah.
And like, there are men too who are single parents who leave treatment because their kids are in the system and call them crying and they want to go get their kids, and they might lose their kids if they don't stay in treatment. But in that immediate moment, like, your parental instinct is, I have to go take care of my kids. And so I really was motivated to do this master's degree and then go into the field of public health as an advocate for gender equality in mental health, right? We need mental health facilities that allow for families to be kept together, right? There's no point in putting a woman in treatment and making her stay there for 1.5 years and then putting her back in the home where she's expected to know how to be a mother, right? Kids should be involved in that process. And it's also incredibly sexist to assume that men don't have those same struggles. And so that was like my motivation behind the degree in a practical sense. But like in a personal, has been a feminist since the first grade way, I find this stuff really important because I called myself a white presenting person earlier, right? Like, my mom is white, but I am an Arab American first generation. And I grew up outside of New York City. 9/11 was the worst day ever, right? But like, all of a sudden my whiteness came into question. I get treated differently when people know my full name.
Jesus, I can't even,
And like, living that little piece of the experience of racism, but knowing I have the privilege of appearing to be white and therefore might be listened to more, just like on a humanity level, has made me want to just know this stuff and be in a position to be helpful. Because I think like the racism I experienced at 11 years old is a huge motivating factor behind why I became an addict, right?
Sure.
Like, to feel so neglected, abused, and hated by those around you, it's a horrible feeling. And so I can't live in a world where I know people live that way without doing something to make it better.
Yeah.
So that's like my personal motivation behind being in this field. But I also, it's, unfortunately, we live in a capitalist hellscape and I need to make money. So I gotta make a job out of this too.
Amen.
That's great. There's that.
Shit, yeah.
Well, that's this has been obviously our most informative and most interesting show for sure, by far. So I can't explain to you how much we appreciate. When Ryan told me that you guys were friends and that this was a possibility, I think that you know,
Full
interviewing
on
people,
erection. I mean, he was like sending me dick pics. He was like, "Oh, we need her on right now." I was like, I have a legitimate fear of bringing my friend on this show.
So I guess I just mean to say thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you so much for having me. And I know we didn't, that was just the tip of the iceberg. So if y'all ever want to do this again, let me know.
Yeah, we
Fuck
can
yeah.
easily have a part two.
Yeah, and if you're watching this and you have questions that we can like relay back to her, let us know and we will.
I would also maybe in the future, I don't, this is might not be inappropriate or might not be appropriate. Your experience of being where you were on 9/11 with your background and stuff, I could sit and talk. I mean, that could be a whole nother. I would love to talk about that possibly. So anyway, yeah, we'd love to have you back on as a guest at some point for sure. I mean,
Sweet.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
yeah, we would normally do a scenario and close the show, but we're kind of ran into time. Do you have a vote for who said the most white privileged thing today? Just so.
Okay, well, I'm torn, right? Because sometimes the most effective thing we can do is put on our listening ears and let those who know tell us what we need to hear, right? But then also, I don't know, like I cannot decide if not talking was Dylan learning and listening, or if Dylan was
Yes, that's what I wanted you to say. That's the most
So
white privileged thing.
I don't know Dylan well enough to know the intention behind that action, but
But you can vote that man. Vote him.
okay, that's gonna be my vote.
That's great.
You heard it here, Dylan.
So
You're white privileged
Dylan will
motherfucker.
you just tell us the topic at some point in the week. That's great. I love that. I'm so glad that worked out that way.
Thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate it. We know it's
Yeah,
super
thanks.
early. Thanks for drinking coffee with us and being here.
No,
Yeah.
thanks for having me. Y'all have a great day.
All right. Talk
Too.
to you later. Later,
Yeah.
guys.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.